Well, it reaches hyperinflation when it prints money like crazy. And the money is going primarily for consumption and is not going for any kind of productive activity. So it's not, so if you think about it, if you have X number of goods in an economy, and that number doesn't change, right? You've just got the X number of goods, but you're printing more and more and more money. So more and more money is chasing the X number of goods. It's bidding the price of those goods up. So the more money you print, the higher the prices go. And that's in that spiral, because the higher the prices go, the poorer people feel, and the more they demand that you print more money. So you print money to put in their wallets, but when they go to the grocery store, the prices have already adapted upwards. So they demand more money for you to print. So, and this goes on and on and on. And it gets into a cycle where it's very, very difficult to exit. I mean, the exit is very painful. The exit is stop the printing presses. And when you stop the printing presses, there's a period in which nobody knows exactly what to do. Prices are still going up because they're expecting inflation, but people suddenly don't have any more money, so they can't buy the stuff. So the economy goes into like a massive recession, and then prices start adapting. So prices start coming down. People start realizing, okay, this is the amount of money I have. This is what I can afford. And everything kind of reaches a new equilibrium. But that is painful and it's hard. It's what the United States went through, even though we didn't have hyperinflation, we had high inflation. But it's what we went to in the recession of 1982, 83. And it's what other countries in Latin America. I grew up in Israel. And in Israel, we had, in the early 1980s, we had 1,000% inflation. And basically you got paid every week, and you took the money and you spent it. Because if you kept the money, within a week, it was worth a lot less than what it was at the beginning of the week. So you wanted to spend it on Monday or Sunday in Israel, because by Friday, it was worth a lot less money. So but you got into the cycle where you demanded a raise from your employer constantly. The employer demanded that the government print more money, so the banks is the way in which the money entered the economy. And then they had to figure out a way of how to suck this additional money out of the economy to stabilize prices. And they did that towards the end of the 1980s, but it was very painful.
Through what, taxation?
No. So, I mean, in Israel, they did it through a combination of things. One, they just stopped printing the money, right? So you just stop the printing presses. That's the easy way to defeat inflation. The other way is that they encouraged the banks to offer people very high interest rates on saving. So they encouraged people not to take their extra money and spend it, but to take their extra money and put it in a saving account, right? Now, the banks couldn't ultimately pay you back that saving because they promised an above market return because the government was incentivizing them just to suck the money out of the economy. And the banks basically all went bankrupt. So, and then the government bailed all the banks out. So it was this multi-step, crazy kind of system. I don't think anybody actually planned it out because government is very bad at these kind of things. They just did stuff and there were really bad consequences. But coming out of the whole thing, the result was that inflation was killed. Banks were bankrupt, were nationalized, and then privatized again. And so the banking system is marginally a little healthier. So they solved the problem. They managed to get out of the inflation, but there were huge short-term pains and probably huge long-term consequences to it. But they did it. Other countries, I mean, Ecuador is probably a good example where they had thousands of percent inflation. And one day they just said, and Zimbabwe did this, right? There's no local currency. Like if you go to Ecuador, there's no local currency. You use dollars.
Really?
Yeah, so they've dollarized their economy. Panama is the same way. Panama, you use dollars. There's no Panamanian peso or something like that. You just use dollars. So they basically took away the printing press. Printing press disappeared. And they said, we're going to discipline ourselves with dollars. And so they did a one-time exchange of all the local currency into dollars. And then they stopped printing. So Ecuador doesn't print any money and Panama doesn't print any money. And they're putting their faith in the Federal Reserve, which for most Latin American countries is not a bad deal. Federal Reserve behaves much more rationally than does a local central bank. There was actually a proposal in Israel to do the same. Treasury Secretary came out one day and said, we should dollarize the economy. That would get rid of all the inflation. And he was absolutely right. He was fired, I think, within a couple of hours, right? Because it was anti-nationalist, right? Israel should have its own. I mean, we have to have our own currency, right? This is a big deal. So it's nationalism often is the barrier to actually dollarizing an economy. And one of the benefits of the euro, although, the euro obviously has a lot of critics out there, one of the benefits of the euro is that Greece doesn't have a central bank. Therefore, it can't just print money like crazy like it did in the 1960s and 70s and drive itself into hyperinflation. Spain can't do the same. They're actually disciplined by the fact that there's this common currency run basically by German bankers who are afraid of inflation and therefore don't, make sure that there's no inflation in the euro. Now, there are other problems that the euro creates, but in terms of inflation, Europe, you don't see inflation because of that.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching the episode. If you're interested in contributing to the conversation and supporting the show, there's 2 easy things you can do. 1, click subscribe, and 2, visit our Patreon page where you get exclusive access to the Exploring Minds community.